These are unsettling supernatural stories without a reasonable explanation of the strange happenings around us. You might have encountered some disturbing occurrence that you were just too scared of. It might even end you. Well, sit back and relax as we journey through the land of spirituality and supernatural chaos. Story 1: The Kind Ghost in the Mountain. When I was a kid, I used to go camping with my friends and family, which I enjoyed doing. I enjoyed playing with other children in the mud, sand, and creeks as a child. This is why I am saying this in particular. During my teenage years, I enjoyed spending time with my peers, engaging in activities such as playing games which include Manhunt Capture, The Flag, and King of the Hill, and delving into the history of the past. On the other hand, now that I am older, I take pleasure in chopping wood for the fire and lighting it early in the morning before everyone else leaves the house so they can have the same enjoyable experiences I had as a child. The fact that it was a family gathering, a church event, or a scouting event did not change the fact that it was an excellent excuse to get out of the house, away from the city, and into nature. That said, I've had some intriguing events, both when I was younger and when I was older, and I will share them with you today in my story. When I was just 7 years old, my father was the scoutmaster of the boys program at our church. Because he regularly went on outings, I was brought along for all of the outings. Since I enjoyed going on outings, I looked forward to this kind of thing because it was something that I loved to do. Our tents would be huddled together if we could brag about finding an excellent site, and we would frequently light our own fires in front of our tents. We would often discover a great spot to pitch our tents, and we would gather them together. Since it was supposed to be a fun occasion, my father was pleased that we were loud all night. The only thing we needed to do was ensure that we had enough energy in the morning to complete the following rounds of whatever we were doing. The rest of the time we would do pretty much anything we wanted. In any case, on this particular occasion, we went into the Miami mountain range for a couple of hours and climbed up the trail to our location. Now, keep in mind that I was 7 years old and I was still very much a child and naive. Do not hold me to the standards that an adult would have for judging things, but if there was a rule that we were required to follow, it was never to leave the trail. This is because the trails in the area we went through were always straight and never had forks. It would be practically difficult to get lost on them. But what ended up happening on this trip, well, I don't consider myself to be a particularly daring or naughty person. I noticed a group of boys go off the track because they had discovered something of interest as they were exploring. I felt it was cool, and as a result, I followed it. Now, at that time, I was wearing those silly light-up shoes that lit up whenever I stepped, so I was not really concerned about the fact that it was getting dark as I wandered off the route. During this time, the lights were dreadful. They hardly lit up. However, at the time, I believed they were brilliant and would illuminate my path through the night without difficulty. The boys I saw at the time are still quite clear in my mind, and to tell you the truth, it has been a very long time since I saw them. Henry and Theodore, his brother, were ambling before me when I noticed them. On the other hand, Theodore, who was 14 years old at the time, was examining the rocks and demonstrating them to his brother, who was 12 years old. These were adults I could put my faith in. Then, I traveled across the Rocky Mountains, taking one sharp stone, one little cactus, one prickly bush, and one trail patch of grass at a time. I did not pay any heed to the minor cuts, scratches, or punches that nature was delivering me as long as I was able to keep up with the boys. Specifically, I recall having difficulty keeping track of time, because I was so eager to keep up with the cool kids and find out what they were doing. While climbing the mountain, I became aware that I had lost sight of the boys at some point, and as a result, I made every effort to go more quickly. As I pushed each rock up and slid between each crack to progress higher up, I felt the dry, peeling rocks against my palms and the slick dirt between the unstable boulders on my shoes. Suddenly, I found myself at the mountain's peak, and there was nothing else for me to climb till I reached the summit. I had completely lost sight of the boys in front of me, and I was standing in what I thought would be the finest location to look over the range to see where everyone was. But all I could see were rocks, plants that had dried out, and dirt that was very pale. I was a child who had become disoriented and lost in the mountains. As I made my way back down the hill, I kept trying to keep my breathing calm, even though I began to panic. Considering that I had not taken any turns, I reasoned that there was no way I could miss the route if I simply went back down. Whoa. The issue was that I started going back down some extremely unfamiliar values and crevices, and there was nothing that I recall traveling up through. This was the difficulty. The same thing happened to me. I yelled as loudly as I could for a very long period, but it did not respond in any way. The fact that the norm was able to hear me due to how loudly I was calling out was something that I found exceedingly peculiar. I remember thinking I would grow up to be an older man still lost in the mountains. I also wanted to become very skilled at lighting fires and catching lizards until someone found me. I would also have to learn how to make and skin a rabbit trap to cook the meat. If I was really lucky, I might even know how to catch something larger. Silly me, right? That was just the child in me thinking out loud. However, I pushed those thoughts aside since I was not quite ready to give up. However, the idea of finding some rocks to light a fire was putting pressure on me to take action because it was beginning to grow dark. While stepping on the rocks on my way back down, I noticed the lights on my shoes shining a little brighter. Afterwards, I recalled seeing something different. I saw a young man who had a striking resemblance to Theodore. Yet at the same time, it was very evident that the youngster was not Theodore. Although I saw him, I was able to discern that he was Theodore's corpse. It was not Theodore who was inside the body. Even though he was in awful form, skinny to the point of decay, and smelled terrible, the person exuded a tremendously ominous atmosphere because of his appearance. Right away, I became aware of a voice emanating from his direction. The voice asked, "Young boy, why have you wandered off the path? Shouldn't you have learned from your parents to avoid going in the wrong direction?" The skinny young man posed a question. I told him that I was following some older boys who had wandered off and attempted to catch up with them, but that I had lost sight of them and was attempting to find my way back. When I was honest with him, I described the road that was meant to be in front of us. At that moment, he placed his finger over his lips, indicating that I should be silent, and he started whispering, "Young child, are you aware of the reason that I am here?" "Not at all. Are you here to cause me harm?" When we went on earlier camping trips, we would tell horror stories about kids being lost in the woods and monsters coming out to eat us, or bad guys coming to take us to an abandoned cabin, where we would be hacked up into thousands of pieces and given to pigs. The question was a response to all of these terrifying stories that we had been told. On the contrary, I am here to protect you from being discovered by someone intent on causing you harm. Despite this, I cannot provide a detailed explanation of how I can accomplish this task. You may recall that you took a different route than you did while you were climbing the mountains. I did respond to it. When I first walked up, I recall traveling a road that was extremely different from the one I remember walking now. I remember this very clearly. Wow. This is because I lead you in a different direction. Somebody at this location intends to separate you from your family and cause you pain in ways that you do not wish to be aware of. The same man who took me away and killed me in these mountains a long time ago is the same man who wants you away. I can still vividly recall how terrified I was at the moment, and I never wanted anyone else to experience the same level of pain that I did. Despite this, the young lad pointed toward the distance and showed me where our vehicles were parked. My eyes opened like salad plates, and I felt a sense of relief and joy. As soon as I understood that I was no longer lost, I spotted the trail we had initially traveled down when we started this journey. Step into the trap. It was getting cold, and because we lived in the desert, I didn't exactly dress or pack warm, but I knew that my dad knew everything there was to know about packing for camp. I responded with a simple gesture and ran off to the truck bed. So I waited eagerly for him to come back so that I could sit by the cozy fire and sleep in the sleeping bag that I was certain he would bring. Sure enough, I heard footsteps dashing to the vehicle, followed by a familiar shout of my name, Moses. I was awaiting his return with great anticipation. Sitting in the truck bed, I saw my father racing toward me. I was afraid he would be angry with me for leaving the truck, but to my 6-year-old mind, he was not even slightly angry with me. We had a reunion that was both regretful and grateful, even though I was prepared to be grounded, and he would immediately send me home and tell my mother what a terrible child I was. He did not do any of those things. This demonstrates that my father was more concerned about my well-being than my own. But it is important to remember that I was a child and did not comprehend these things. I can still vividly recall the fear or anxiety that he exhibited. It was a look that I had never before seen Dad exhibit in my entire life. I walked back up the trail with my dad, and this time I did not leave the trail for $1,000,000. I walked close by my dad's side the entire way. Because of how tucked away it is, I strolled up to a location I don't think I would have ever seen. However, the shimmering light of a campfire comforted me that everything was all right and that the rest of the children were there, and they were happy to see me because they had all been told that I had gone missing. Even though I was still unable to accept that I had communicated with a ghost, the young ghost could genuinely assist me. As children, we are told tales about ghosts, which are said to be wicked and have the ability to kill and consume young children. This one had every opportunity to kill me or do anything he pleased. But this ghost was particularly different. Despite this, I could not tell anyone about him since no one would believe me. I had no choice but to let it go. In the present day, after several years have passed and I have spent a significant amount of time camping, I find myself on the opposite end of the Powerball, so to speak. I am now the scoutmaster, just like my father was. I am teaching the younger kids how to make fires, perform basic first aid, and all the cool kid techniques scattered here and there on how to survive in the wilderness. During one of these journeys, I conversed with my father, who was now much older, while I was a young man in the prime of my life. We started chatting about when I was in the mountains and completely lost my way. It would appear that I had it easy because of the scare that day. All I had to do was suffer for a couple of hours by myself while imagining that I would grow up to be an older man in the mountains. Before the invention of cell phones, any reasonable person would travel to the base of the mountain, locate the road closest to them, and ask to be brought to a gas station or some other location to make a call. However, it is important to remember that this was a young child's brain. During the time that I was missing, my father went through something quite similar to what I did, but he never told me what happened to me. My father was leading the way because he led the group. He must have thought I was following along with one of the boys because they knew they should look out for and protect me. Even though this was a falsehood that was never repeated after the occurrence, my father recalled glancing back when they arrived at the camping area and discovered that I was not there. Fear swept over him, and his heart felt like the depths of the Titanic. The sun was about to set, and his child, who was 6 years old, was supposed to be somewhere in the mountains. He hurried down the mountain trail and discovered a note he had never seen. The note was pinned to one of the thorny bushes off the trail. This note, which said, "I see you left your kid unattended. I guess you won't want him that badly, so I'll take him off you," took him completely by surprise and caused him to lose his mind. In a rage, my father rushed all the way down the route, entirely ignoring the possibility that he would trip over one of the many bumps scattered along the way. He said he could nearly picture me playing with one of the boulders or plants along the trail. My afterimage around each curve disappeared, much to his dismay, and he continued to run. He stated that he was more terrified than ever before since he was under the impression that he had lost me to a creep in the mountains due to his incompetence. And in the end, he arrived at the place where he watched all the vehicles being parked and realized there was no longer any chance of finding me. Someone scratched me and then shot me like a bullet. I couldn't breathe. As he hurried back to the truck, he yelled out my name. He was getting ready to charge down the rickety driveway that led to the mountains, phone the police, and get everyone out of there as quickly as possible. However, he saw nothing more than an additional afterimage, which would later be shown as my head when I emerged from the trunk bed. Because I had mentioned to him that I had left the trail voluntarily, found my way back, and waited to be found with no indication that anyone else was nearby. He mentioned that he did not tell anyone about the strange note because he believed that it was just one of the boys being stupid and leaving time capsules along the path. It was only natural since the mountains were highly inhospitable. Anyone rushing up and down there at match 5 trying to scratch youngsters if they were even there, to begin with, since it was such a strenuous trail to climb, and it was also close to impossible, if not incredibly implausible. The conclusion that it was merely one of the children acting foolishly and attempting to frighten everyone by setting up a stage for another night of horror stories was a much more plausible explanation. Until my father had a dream last night in which he spoke with a child who said that he had been kidnapped in the same mountain range. He had been under the impression that this was an accurate statement. I will not lie to you, Sam. I was initially scared that your child was a gunner. I instructed him to keep quiet and hide in the vehicle to avoid being noticed. However, the wicked men saw him get into the truck's bed and were getting ready to catch him. If you had not run as fast as you did, he would have jumped out and dived into the back of the truck to get him. I guess you'd made the right choice to run down the path as fast as you did. When my father was talking to the ghost, he added that he had emphasized to the boys how important it was to always travel in groups. As a response, the ghost stated that this was most likely why the other guys were not targeted throughout the process. He also expressed his desire that he wished his leaders taught him to be in a group, since he was alone when he was taken. My father said he thanked the ghost for assisting him and keeping me away from the unknown beast for as long as he did. He replied, "Indeed. I tried to help someone else, but they got caught and were killed. Please take care of the child for me, okay? This is the first time that I have been able to save someone else." The remainder of the night, after I had a conversation with my father about other matters, after I'd been wide-eyed for some time, the same thing happened when I told him the story's conclusion. Some individuals are not physically present, but still attempt to do good in the world. However, the majority of spirits are not as they are portrayed in movies. Some people are wonderful, courageous individuals who oppose evil wherever they can, and I want to express my gratitude to whoever you are. Although it is unlikely that you will receive this message, the message's spirit will reach you at some point in the future. Story 2, The Sage. I came across a person who has been employed as a security guard for a considerable time online. During his work, this individual witnessed several occurrences that he could not explain and kept himself awake at night. A new buddy of mine who works as a security guard went down into the basement of a hotel, and what he discovered was, to put it mildly, peculiar. This took place on Wednesday night and Thursday morning. My organization has only recently begun providing armed protection for an older hotel located in the northern St. Regis neighborhood. I don't know how ancient this location is, but this hotel has operated since I was a very young child. At the time that we began the contract, the requirement for the first 2 months was to have 2 security officers working, one of whom was an experienced officer and the other of whom was a novice officer. During my most recent shift, I was paired with a novice who was quite unpleasant. This guy was both arrogant and ignorant. It has been known for many years that this hotel has been the location of several deaths, including those that were caused by suicide, natural causes, and even a few instances of murder. My first concern was to guard against the possibility of serious drug users sneaking into the building and squatting there. The new officer, on the other hand, was eager to investigate everything, from the smallest noise to anyone walking around after midnight, to determine whether they were present as guests. That being said, the fact that we were called to the basement altered the officer's naturally inquisitive personality or affected him. "Front desk security," the hotel radio shouted out sloppily. I responded, "Go to security," because I thought another visitor had been caught complaining about their neighbor or a homeless person in the lobby. "You will need to come to acquire the key for the access stairs," the night auditor remarked while partially awake. "Can you both check the basement?" I wasn't there when a motion sensor trip was transmitted to the front desk switchboard. "I'll have to come to grab the key." Meanwhile, how would someone have gotten down there if we had to get a key to access it? As we approached the front desk, the night auditor informed us that the switchboard had rung twice since she called us less than 3 minutes ago. This raised my curiosity, and I wondered how someone could have gotten down there without a key to the staircase door. The auditor saw the surprise on our faces and said, "Oh, the elevator was broken. It was just that it only went from the first floor to the service area of the basement without the maid's key at the time." I neglected to say that it was not broken, but instead, She mentioned it as if it were not a significant issue. I was so irritated that I took the key from the counter and instructed my junior officer to ensure they appeared alive if someone was down there and we needed to get the information. We started hearing heavy moaning and breathing that sounded like someone was behind the door or on the full opposite side of the basement. This was happening at the mouth of the cellar. I noticed the new officer being cracking, so I said to him, "Do you understand that I am the lead officer and that you will not do anything unless I instruct you to? That you will remain on my 6, and that you will follow my lead before we enter?" I yelled at the newbie. He gave me a brief nod full of self-assurance. After pushing open the door, I announced, "Security!" We follow a specific procedure when we approach a location on most of our properties when we have reason to believe that trespassers are present. If anyone is here, please make your presence known. As I continued forward, the novice followed behind me. Since the safety lights were on every other fixture, I did not consider it necessary to put on the full lights because there was sufficient light to see everything well. We started to hear what sounded like someone jingling a giant keyring as we moved toward the opposite side of the basement from where we were. I started to feel a loss of confidence, and fear began to take hold of me, but I had to maintain my composure to be the senior officer in control. As I started walking down the hallway, I became aware of the sound of the hood of a holster being released from its attachment. I was so disappointed that I immediately turned back to reprimand the novice for drawing his weapon. "Did you hear that?" He was standing there, pale and concentrated, with his eyes fixed in front. The rage had transformed into confusion after that. His speech was stuttering. I responded that it could be nothing more than a machine switching. But you must always remember to follow my lead. Because I was under the impression that someone was at the end of the corridor in the main laundry, I unfastened the clasp on my taser, just in case. We were getting closer to the end of the basement, where we noticed the other barred stairwell entry was located. But we did not discover anything out of the ordinary, or a person attempting to break in. As we approached the freight elevator, we came across a sign responsible for the subsequent chain of events. I thought to myself, could this be a red flag? "Security," I called. "All elevator access to the basement will be prohibited overnight, beginning on the 1st and continuing through the 12th. If you require access, you must obtain the key from the register desk." As a result, the rookie and I started double-checking every location on the route, and when we went back to the stairs from which we had come, we started experiencing some minor paranormal phenomena. It all began when the rookie discovered a few spiritual artifacts while still in the main washing room near the far back secondary stairs. The rookie found an unburned bundle of white sage wrapped in white lace sitting on top of one of the enormous machines. This was the beginning of everything. Even though the novice did not know sage, he immediately dropped it from the machine. "Hey?" I discovered a peculiar joint. He was clutching a bundle of white sage when I turned around to see him. "First, you should drop that down, and second, that is not marijuana. Rather, it is sage that is used for purification of some sort of supernatural powers." I urged the child not to pick up anything, especially if it was not something he was familiar with, because not only did he not know anything about paranormal occurrences, but he also did not know how to protect himself against them. The initial event occurred after he returned it to the location from which he had taken it to himself. When he was putting it down 20 feet behind him, a shell full of clean towels that had been folded fell off the wall completely. At the same time that we were documenting it for a report, a brief snicker emerged from the corridor. It was a snicker that lasted for a single second. We started moving to the next section, where the appliances and furnishings with excessive stock were stored. On the other hand, an overhead pipe that had not been leaking when we had gone beneath it was suddenly leaking, suggesting that a massive explosion had just occurred. Who would have heard it regardless of where we were in the basement? I found this strange because I was certain of the volume of water leaking out of the building. During the time that I was examining the pipe to determine where the leak was coming from, the novice once again picked up something. "Hey! Hope this is not another sage." I saw him trying to get a whiff of Palo Santo wood, properly tied by a red ribbon. "Dude," I said, looking at him with all tiredness and anger. Seeing me in that situation, he had to just drop it and peered down into the puddle of water that had formed due to the leak. where he saw a bare footprint within the water. I began to experience a sense of panic as I expressed the necessity for us to return to the upper floor. We moved on to the second and to last portion. Almost instantly, I became aware of a cross that was hung on the wall. It was an award I had not noticed, adorned with lavender sage wrapped in purple lace. While attempting to conceal my increasingly uneasy temper, I said, "Take a quick look around and ensure nothing is going on so we can go." It wasn't until right before we passed through the double doors that anything transpired in that portion after that. At that moment, the safety lights were behind us, that was very close to the laundry, began flickering. I was starting to worry because I thought something was about to happen, but I wasn't sure what the show would be about. I instructed the novice to run back to the corner of the room. Finally, the last place we came from was two little planning offices in the hub room. This was the previous location from which we had come. When we entered the basement, the light was off inside the hub room. It wasn't like that when we came before. While checking the planning offices, which was a quick process, I instructed the rookie to keep an eye on the hallway. However, I found nothing when I went into the hub room to check and turn on the lights. As I peered down, I noticed that the hub room server monitor displayed the primary cameras. At the front desk, a single monitor displayed all of the hotel's cameras. However, the cameras only showed the external hallways of the rooms and the areas around the pool. I took a quick check at the screen and noted that the lights in the main laundry room were still flickering. After some time, there was a significant pause. The lights came on, and the night vision ability began to activate. As time passed, a strange person from the laundry appeared on the screen more clearly. While staring at the figure with great concentration, I became aware that it was standing next to the machine that the white sage was operating. A brilliant flash illuminated the monitor window. As soon as the light illuminated again, my heart sank. A moment ago, the figure standing in the night vision of the camera had just disappeared from the room, which was now completely vacant. A bundle of black sage was fastened to the door frame of the hub room and wrapped in black twine. I turned my attention away from the door frame and observed the bundle. Still shocked by what I had seen on the video, I responded, "We are finished down here." We went inside the stairway and secured the door before entering. The night auditor approached us in the foyer and inquired whether we had discovered anything. After exiting the building through the front entrance, I lit a cigarette and said, "Come, I'll show you what we discovered." I then pulled the pack out of my pocket. With the strange look on my face, the auditor asked, "You did not touch the sage, did you?" I did not utter a single word, but I did stare her in the eye, which created the impression that we actually touched and saw the sage. It has been nearly a week since I visited that location, and I am not looking forward to returning. After some time had passed, I learned this afternoon that the rookie, whom I had been working with that evening, had resigned from the company. I was not informed whether he had resigned or was fired, but he was no longer a staff member. I am curious as of today as to whether or not he departed because of what has occurred. I can still see unusual things whenever I sleep, so I make it a point to sleep with the lights on and engage in activities that keep me occupied. Even though I knew what we witnessed and experienced was not typical, we never returned to being the same after that day. Story 3. Unsettling Game. Courage, honor, and loyalty were the three qualities that were considered to be the most essential for a samurai to possess. There is no place for those who are mentally weak to take on a role that would need them to fall on their swords if they are unsuccessful practically. Not only was it essential for the samurai to be courageous when confronted by their adversaries, but it was also essential for them to be in command of their existential anxieties and even to remain stoic when confronted with dangers from other locations. This was because they did not know what could come their way at any given moment. Darker areas are locations that don't always appear to be there in our world, but are there beyond the shadows and the curtain of our reality. Our world is not always filled with dark places. It was in 1660 that the very first instance of this game being played was documented in the historical record. In the late hours of one night, a group of young samurai met to confront their deepest fears. After placing a mirror on a table, the group surrounded the mirror with candles. They went into another room and sat in a circle after taking turns lighting 100 candles slowly and methodically. It would take the bravest of them all to start the ritual. We have heard of these deadly games and how they affect anyone involved, but being a teenager, I formed a group. My friends and I decided to try it out to know if it was real or probably just a mere story. Promise, the first boy with us, stood up and began to tell a story. It is a terrifying story of the demons that live in darkness. We hung on his every word as he spoke in this darkened room. However, when he had finished the story, the boy went to the room where the candles were lit, looked deep into the mirror, and blew out one candle. He remained there in silence for several minutes before rejoining the group. This practice continued long into the night. We would take turns telling stories of the strange and the unsettling spirits. The intention is to strike fear in the minds of their companions. One by one, after each story, the teller would head into the candlelit room, look into the mirror, and blow out a candle. Hours passed, and you can only imagine what was racing through the minds of the young samurai at this point. Their imaginations are ablaze with tales of the impossible. And with each tale that passed into our ears, the candlelit room would get darker and darker. Over the years, many who have played this game claim to have experienced hallucinations throughout. It grows more and more vivid as the room grows darker, but the final storyteller seems to be at the most risk. Who do you think the last storyteller would be? At that time, we were 6 in number, which was 3 boys and 3 girls. After the 6th story was told, the last samurai walked into the room. The mirror, now lit by a single candle flickering in the pre-dawn breeze. It's hard not to imagine she would have hesitated before blowing out that candle and being plunged into complete darkness. What happened after this final step of the game was unknown. Very few have completed the process, and they are the ones who normally don't like to talk about it. Blowing out that final candle was a step into the unknown, a place where the darkness is all-encompassing, and the things that live in that darkness have free reign. We call these games rituals, but they can be seen as rituals. Immediately, Rose blew off the last candle. As she was the last storyteller, everywhere went completely dark. Fear gripped us instantly. We tried to turn on our phone flashlight, but all phones were off automatically. This was very strange. We thought someone among us was only trying to play a trick or prank with us to scare us more. But this wasn't funny anymore. Still in the dark room, we started hearing small whispering. As terrified as we were, we just couldn't see anything. No light, no candle, nothing. Just some very dark room with shining eyes moving towards us. I got up from where I was sitting and called out each of my friends' names individually to ensure we were all complete. But when I got out and called Rose, there was no response. Apparently, we only heard an unusual voice that didn't sound like Rose's. Immediately, something touched me, and none of my friends admitted to coming close to me. This was becoming more creepy than I expected. Initially, before we concluded a Friday hangout game by midnight, I went online and did some research about this particular game. My findings were scary because none of the players would make it out alive. I tried to locate the front door so we could at least run out and ask for help, but the door seemed jammed, like it would only take a miracle to help us out alive. Certainly, there was no going out or coming in. We just had to remain there and probably die. Now, Rose was gone and we were still in the dark. Who knows who the next victim would be? Story 4, The Teacher's Quarter. The fact that my mother works in a school is a component of her profession. The preschool where she works is famous for being haunted, and she works with children with special needs. She is a regular at the preschool. She shared with me that this was something that her co-workers would let her know from time to time. When it comes to matters of this nature, my mother has a certain amount of experience. In any case, she discussed a few of the events that took place at that school during the few years she was a teacher there. She stated that sometimes someone would knock on the door, and that she did not open it personally every time it was knocked on. Her habit was to leave it unlocked and to claim that she was inside at all times. Most of the time, it was one of her other employees, but she mentioned that there were instances when she would hear a knock and say, "Come in," but nothing happened. While in the same room, She and another instructor used her laptop to find a present for her husband. The lunch break was during the same time. This computer belonged to her co-worker, and the gift was intended for her husband. My mother commented on her co-worker's husband while they were searching. Then, all of a sudden, the computer played a song at the highest possible volume that referenced the first name of her co-worker's husband. Both of these events occurred simultaneously. My mother said they laughed it off and ultimately decided to get a speaker. According to her, it did not really terrify them. However, within the first week of its use, this speaker was discarded after it had been given as a gift to her co-worker's husband. The story went that her husband had it next to him at his place of work one day, and the speaker played something eerie out of nowhere, just like the Mac laptop. I had no idea what it was, but my mother told me that the speaker was turned off and not connected to anything at the time. Even though it was supposed to be a surprise anniversary present, he threw it away rather quickly. On a day that was absolutely lovely for spring, the school was late in opening its doors. They were under the impression that a child had broken into the school and smashed a few separate rooms. That was the first thing they examined, and it turned out that the preschool had cameras. Nevertheless, there was no evidence of someone breaking in. While this was happening, the camera installed in my mother's room captured pictures of chairs being removed from tables, and then it showed someone throwing books off the shelves. The photograph was taken at some point during the night hour. You should know that when you were a teacher back then, you were required to live in an apartment on the school grounds. According to her, the lights were also flickering occasionally, and she mentioned that other classrooms experienced the same phenomenon. The staff conference room was in this area, and no cameras were concealed within its walls. The janitor reportedly stated that when he stepped in, all the chairs were pushed out and facing differently. My mother shared this information with me. Although a report was filed with the police, the officers could not find concrete evidence of a break-in. They thought someone had remained inside the building while it was open, waited until it closed, and then played a major joke on them. What disturbed me, however, was that I was aware that teachers locked their classroom doors before leaving, and I was curious as to how anyone could have entered without setting off an alarm. No matter what happens, we strongly suspect that the school is haunted. Story 5. Unknown. I need assistance figuring out what the heck is in my possession. I returned from a week-long vacation last night, and my apartment is experiencing the same issues as the house I was living in. Since I hadn't slept well the past week, the house we stayed in was very large, accommodating all 24 members of my extended family, and it was really beautiful. The house was divided into 2 sections. The older side, which consisted mostly of a studio, 3 bedrooms upstairs, and a basement, and the more recent side. It was a stunning property, but I will only go into a little detail regarding the more recent side, as no paranormal activity occurred there. My girlfriend and I received the worst room in the house because we were the last to arrive, so we had to share it. We were given the tiniest room in the home, measuring only 10 feet by 10 feet, and it was situated on the original side of the house, right in front of the basement steps. I had been driving for 7 hours on that particular day and was extremely exhausted. I briefly said hello to everyone, and then I went straight to bed to get some rest. It was almost 10 o'clock when my girlfriend and I went to bed. Fortunately, she could doze off at any location within 5 minutes. Within a matter of seconds, she was out. I was experiencing a peculiar, unsettling feeling in my chest. It was not specifically a frightening sense. Rather, it was the annoying, alert feeling you get when you have the impression that someone or something is watching you. On the other hand, to calm myself down, I immediately went to a YouTube channel called Top Scares. After I had been on the road for almost an hour, I became aware that my girlfriend was experiencing a nightmare. I gently roused her from her sleep and touched her arm. Nevertheless, as soon as I touched her, she screamed so loudly that she was startled awake. She whispered something that sounded like a ghost and went back to sleep. At this point, it is safe to say that I was adequately frightened and had just begun to feel increasingly exhausted. As a result, I went back to watching several episodes of Top Scares, which were very intriguing. After almost 2 hours, my girlfriend awoke and began screaming again, claiming the footsteps were approaching. She then passed out immediately afterwards. Again, I decided that I would not be going to sleep that night and ended up returning to YouTube. I needed to be awake throughout the night to witness the ghost my girlfriend was talking about. Even though I felt sick to my stomach with terror, I had no choice but to face my concerns head on. After another hour, I saw that my girlfriend had risen from bed, but was still asleep. She shifted her position to sit on the edge of the bed and began conversing with the corner of the room. I was afraid, but not before she ultimately lay back down. After the first night, there were usually only some creaks on the floor, knocks on the wall, and knocks on the door. Aside from moving about the room, the only other noteworthy thing that happened was something sitting on the edge of my bed the second to final night. I remember that I wasn't at my apartment when I sat up in time to see the indentation lift off the side of the bed. So my initial reaction was that my cat had hopped up on the bed. My partner was on the other side of the bed and nowhere close to where the indentation occurred, so she couldn't have been responsible. It was hard to push so far down into the bed I was staying in because it was as firm as a rock. I was eager for daybreak to arrive to escape this spot because it was so scary quickly. The setting was what I found to be the creepiest. I said goodbye to my family the following morning and explained that I had to be at work then. I was finally home at my apartment after a lengthy travel. I was relieved that there would be no more frightful or restless nights, but I had no idea what was ahead. After another restless night and a tiring day of driving, I finally made it home and curled up with some Netflix. My girlfriend spent most of the evening out because she had plans to hang out with her friends. When my cat and dog began following something around my apartment, I thought I'd finally be free of the scary stuff. Their heads were moving quickly, and everything they were seeing moved quickly. Although I had previously observed them tracking bugs, they had never really given it much attention. Instead, they would generally sigh and go on, but this time was different. Apparently, my dog Max started growling when whatever it was moved into the corner of the room. My cat, Lily, jumped right next to me on the couch while Max growled at the corner and slowly backed up toward me. After enduring this kind of strange thing for an entire week, I was so tired and annoyed that it kept me from sleeping that I wasn't even terrified anymore. Max began barking hysterically as he saw something coming from the corner in our direction, something Lily and Max both noticed. Once I managed to stop him barking, I heard a high-pitched growl coming from the middle of the room, resembling the growl of a small puppy or girl. Based on my dog's tracking, it was very short, swift, and capable of jumping onto tables and countertops. I got up, looked at it broadly, and pleaded with it to go. I felt a tremendous surge of cold sweats and goosebumps in unexpected places. Still, I repeated it much more firmly this time, and I opened my front door to allow it out because it seemed like whatever it was had become quite agitated. It had no effect, but I could still feel my rage building. I believed I was safe since my pets were tracking toward the entrance. After about 2 minutes, my cat was staring at the same spot with full alert, while my dog began barking at the corners of the room where the door was. It hadn't been violent yet, just bothersome, so at this point I gave up and assumed it would just go away. Max soon dozed down at my feet, and Lily darted into the adjacent room, peeking her head out the door occasionally before bolting back inside. At this point, I just gave up trying to handle it and turned on my earplugs to drown out the noise of the walls while watching YouTube. Whatever it was, I used this as an opportunity to keep my mind away from it, so I decided to stay up till my girlfriend returned. Every 5 minutes, while I was lying on my couch, I felt something jabbing me in my arms, legs, and feet. It wasn't painful, it was just persistent. After a while, it started to poke me in the nose. Once more, I choose to ignore it since I've discovered that if I fight it, it will just become worse. Even though my thermostat indicated it was 76 degrees, I could always feel the flat being significantly colder when anything similar happened. My girlfriend had been pounding, prodding, and occasionally tugging in arm brushes for hours before she finally made it home. I knew whatever was left when she opened the door because I no longer felt anxious, and there were no strange noises. I had therefore one of the most peaceful evenings I've had in more than a week. I'm not sure if it's gone forever, or if it will resurface tonight, but I sincerely hope not, since it may drive someone crazy. Aside from the growl and the brief but intense feeling of rage, it hasn't been aggressive or unsettling, just bothersome. Any guidance on locating or establishing safe communication with it would be much valued. Now, what do you think about these stories? Have you had a similar experience? Feel free to share it with us in the comment section below. Are you a huge fan of scary stories? Check out any of these intriguing videos displaying on your screen now.